Hello, and welcome to Honor Talk. This is the podcast where we explore the legacy left behind in the wake of organ, eye, and tissue donation. I'm your host, Bobby Gomez. Just a quick note, the views and the stories that are shared here are my own. They do not represent any specific organ procurement organization. Thanks for pressing play today. Now let's get started. We're here. We're live. We're recording. Yep. This is it. All right. We've been waiting for this day a long time. I think we've been going back and forth for some time.
Been pushing this.
Day has finally arrived. Introduce yourself. Tell the folks.
Here we are. Good morning. So my name is Ivan Sampson, and I have been excited for this. I'm excited for this. I've been pushing you to just get us on the calendar.
Yes, I agree.
Here we are.
So tell us a little bit. First of all, where are we at? So this is Honor Talk, right? This is the podcast where we discuss organ, eye, and tissue donation and everything related and associated with. So I know what your background is. I know where you come from, but I think the folks that are out here listening and watching don't know who you are. So tell us a little bit about who you are, kind of what your background is, and let's start there.
Yeah. So my name is Ivan Sampson. I am what is known as a designated requester. For the world at large, that means nothing. But for people who work in the organ procurement organization, I am one of the individuals who walks into a room to speak to families about organ donation at the end of life or near the end of life. I started my work with organ procurement organizations with Donor Network West here in Northern California. That's in fact where I met you. Don't know exactly how many years ago, but that's my background. Before coming to Donor Network West, I worked with two organizations that really put me on the path. The first one was the Victims of Crime Program, Critical Response Network out of Alameda County, and also with Andre Salvage and Associates, who I remain an associate with him close to 20-something years now.
That's a lot of background. Exactly. So to take it all in, I mean, you started with Victims of Crime and kind of working in that realm, and then kind of scooted over towards organ procurement and being the designated requester. That's tough work. I mean, for those that are listening, going in and talking to a family in their deepest and darkest of times and having the finesse and the ability to actually go in and meet them where they're at, I think that is very, very powerful work. And it definitely takes a strong individual to be able to do that. So I commend you for that for sure. Tell me, what was your drive? Like, why did you decide that this was the world for you? I mean, you could have been a plumber, you could have been an electrician, you could have been all these different things. What was your drive that drove you to this world?
I discovered something about my ability to be in very difficult conversations. I was in a living room. I was in a family living room with a mother who had just lost her son. She lost her son several states away. And at the moment that we were getting together, she was going through the difficulty of not being able to be at his side, not knowing what to do following a homicide, not knowing where to start. And the devastation that I felt in that room for her really helped me understand that I was in a position to be able to help people navigate that type of moment. And I discovered after some time of doing this that I am well in that moment. I am okay in that moment. I'm comfortable in that moment, to be present in that moment, to give to other human beings what they are lacking in that moment. Sometimes it's just presence and not saying anything.
Man, that's a discovery. To try and to see the light and kind of see that you have that ability to kind of be a light or be at least somebody who can walk with them in that moment. I think that's powerful.
Yeah, it was a surprise. I had no idea that I had that in me. I had no idea. And I'm glad that I discovered it. I think now I think of that moment and I say, well, I'm glad I discovered it. And also, I can't see not being able to use this gift.
Yeah, I agree.
It keeps me moving. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so then what did that bridge look like going from victims of crime and victims of violence? And then now we cross over. So then there's this bridge where we went from victims of violence and victims of crime. And now we're talking to families, right? And their darkest moments kind of in the ICUs and the ERs. And we're asking them about organ donation or organ procurement. And I mean, what was that transition like going from talking to victims of crime?
Yeah. So that transition happened as a result of a conversation where I said, I don't know that I can keep seeing just the devastating end of the work that I'm doing. It was difficult to see the positive end result other than the beginning of their healing. And I thought, that number one, this is going to make me an extremely jaded human being. This is really difficult to do long term. And the statement I made at the time was, I don't know that can keep doing this. This is devastating, right?
Yeah.
And someone said, I think you would be good on the transplant team. And I thought, you're out of your mind.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, what are you talking about? I didn't see the bridge. I did not see what that meant. And the person said to me, well, you're great with families, and families need you in that world. And I was very fortunate that that connection was made for me. And when I first started, I did not know at the moment, but when I first started in the OPO world, I started off as a donation program consultant, which meant that I was going to be the liaison embedded in hospitals,
Oh yeah.
being their liaison between their hospital and the donor programs that were run. And that was such a soft entry into the OPO world. It was the perfect entryway. It was a perfect pathway because,
That's a vast cry from what you were doing in
yeah,
Bitcoin. That's a lot different.
yeah. But it really gave me an understanding about how donation works in a hospital. It gave me an understanding of why hospitals really dislike having OPOs in their building. It really gave me such a vast understanding. And that was a transition. That's how I got into the OPO world. Now, how I started speaking to families, that's another
Yeah,
another
that's I
bridge.
mean, it sounds like the DPC world, right? So that donation program consultant and being that liaison between an OPO and a hospital, that's a soft landing. Like coming from where you were victims of crime and then coming into that, that's a pretty soft landing because you're coming in and now what's kind of been stripped from you is that ability to have that face to face with the families. That's you're the person now sitting in front of you is not the family anymore. So at some point you went from this DPC and then you started interjecting and kind of talking to families again. So tell us when you finally got in front of a family, because I know that I'm sure there's a story out there. As soon as you got in front of this family for the first time and you had the ability to actually talk to a family again and get that face to face time about organ donation, and this is different now. It's a different world because this is not victims of crime. What was that like?
Well, I would say that we have to start somewhere else because what I recognized first was the suffering and the pain that the staff in the hospital
Oh,
were going through,
okay. Okay.
right?
Yes. Yes.
So I recognize in the faces of the nurses, in the faces of the doctors, the sort of pain and suffering that I would see in the homes that I would go visit, right? When I was visiting families and I was doing home visits with them, I recognized the pain on their faces. I recognized that this is a human being who is losing someone.
That's hard.
And so that's actually where I started. And that I carry that with me even to this day, where I say to myself, I don't skip a step, I don't skip a person, right? The suffering of the person who is caring for a patient, certainly not the same as a suffering felt by the family who's losing their loved one. But I recognize even when I very first started that this is a human being who is losing someone, whether that was a doctor, whether that was the bedside nurse, whether that was the respiratory therapist who's been coming in and out of that room, whether that was a phlebotomist, even the unit clerk who's been greeting the family members as they come and go.
Yeah.
By the time I got to start interacting with them, the majority of the time they had spent 2 or 3 days with that family. They've been developing a relationship, they've been developing rapport, they've been developing an understanding of who this patient was. And when I would see their faces, I would recognize they're going through loss. And I navigated my environment providing care and concern for them.
This is an interesting perspective. This is a different avenue for sure. I mean, I would say we give a lot of regard to the family who's losing somebody, and there's not a lot of regard to the staff or to the ones that are caring for them because you're right. They do build a relationship, they build a rapport. It's not just about that was John Smith in room 2. They know John Smith's favorite color. They know when and where he got married. They've seen the wife. They've had an opportunity to build something with them. So to see the recognition in their face and derive that same look from the same victims of crime when you saw those same losses, and to take in, there's another loss here. The staff is also losing somebody. I mean, I don't think that that's talked about enough. I mean, the staff is losing somebody, and there's definitely something there for them too. So that's interesting. That's definitely really interesting.
The transition of families is perfectly informed by the care I was providing for the nursing staff and the hospital staff. Because if the staff feel like, you know what, you are the right person for this family, the staff inform you how to care for this family. The nurse will pull you aside
How they guide
and
you.
and and they'll guide you, and they'll say to you, you know, look, I know that the legal Mexican is a husband, but the sister, the husband's sister, he's with them, she's with him every step of the way, and he's not going to be able to talk much. She's doing all the answering, but if you pay attention, they're communicating. She's looking at him and he's telling her and she's answering, but that's him communicating. Just give him some time. He's not going to talk to you right away. So they would say things like that. In fact, I developed so many relationships.
It's almost like a roadmap they're giving you.
Yeah, yeah. I've had a few physicians who would say, Ivan, if it's you, you could go in. If it's you, go in. But that's based on the relationship that I've built with that physician who has sat with me providing support for a family. And I think that that pathway, treating for the care team first, family next, has really it's been a successful pathway for me. Yeah.
You know what I've noticed too, and maybe this has been your experience, but the staff really do covet their patient population. Yeah, that is their family, for whatever period of days or weeks in the coming, in that period they're there with them. And they almost guard them. They're almost safeguarding them. They're the guardians of these people. And the younger that patient, the more guarded the family or the more guarded the staff is in regards to the family. So sometimes, a lot of times they become the roadmap, but sometimes because the patient or the person that they're so close with, it's not even a roadmap. Sometimes it becomes a roadblock because they feel like they need to protect them from whatever that is. Maybe they're trying to guard them from more pain, more decision making, whatever the case may be. But I've seen families or staff that will guard or be a guardian for the family, and that guardianship over the family is almost intensified the younger that patient is. Has that been your
Hmm.
experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, pediatric units, they don't want to see us. They don't want us on the floor. They don't want us sitting by their computers. And there's a very real and deep part of me that hopes and prays that that never goes away. There should be, and I've said this directly to nurses, to doctors. In fact, the last time I said this out loud was a bedside nurse at St. Jude Hospital in Southern California, where she said to me, "I really hate when you guys are here."
Yep. I was just going to say,
And my response was, "Good. That should never go away. And I hope that never goes away because it tells me everything I need to know about who you are as a nurse. And anyone that tries to take that away, you know who you're talking to. You should always feel like you don't want us in the hospital. That's the right feeling to have. Now, once we're here, we have to find a way to collaborate. But I promise you, I'm glad that feeling is there. I'm sorry that that feeling is there, but it tells me everything I need to know about who you are as a nurse and what this patient has meant for you. So, with that in mind, that's how I'm going to support this family. I'm going to treat this family with an understanding of that feeling that you have.
I think that we know that we come with a message of hope, right? So I think that you and I, working in the organ procurement world, know that we are coming to offer something, at least in this dark time. And I've said this to other staff that are kind of learning, and I've said this to members, of the public that don't know really what we do. But I've never said this directly to a family or even a direct contact with a nurse who's dealing with the family. Is the one thing that we offer is we offer the ability to say but. And what that means is that in the victims of violence, it's definitive, it's over. That person has suffered a loss, and you can't offer them anything else except for comfort because there's no end after, there's no beginning after that. It's going to be a funeral, it's going to be a wake, it's going to be whatever, and then they're put to rest. And of course, there's all the memories and everything that comes with it. But there's no life after that. It's just done. And in this world, we can say yes, Johnny didn't survive it, or Billy didn't survive that. However, or but through organ, eye, and tissue donation, they're going to be able to help other people. They're going to be able to live on. They're going to be able to continue a legacy. There's going to be more to the story. It doesn't just end here. And I think, and that is the message of hope that we bring. And when we have that opportunity to bring that hope, it's something that gives us that little bit of sense or that little bit of light that allows us to kind of move on through our day and kind of see that next patient, because then we have the opportunity to, you know, give the family something. You said something else. What was it? You said, yes. And this is very true too. For those that are listening that are, maybe not from the medical field, there's a ton of superstition. There's a ton of superstition in the medical and the hospitals. And one of the things that I will point towards is you'll have a patient who maybe has some respiratory issues, and they might be looking at a possibility of having to be intubated. And the nurse is really hoping that this patient doesn't get worse. And the respiratory therapist and the doctor are all wondering and hoping this patient doesn't get worse. So what do? They're preparing. They want to be prepared. So they'll take a ventilator and they'll park it outside the room. And it's kind of to shoo away the bad juju, if you will, right? If I park this outside the room, I'm not going to need it. But if I'm not prepared, I'm going to need it. So they'll over prepare. They'll put everything outside the room, and it's just to ward off the bad juju in the event that we don't need it. Well, what I've been told by staff is we are seen as the juju. So when we show up in the eyes of some of the hospital staff, the physicians, we are the omen. We've shown up. It's kind of like they almost have a sense or a feeling that they've failed in their job somehow, or they didn't do something that they should have. And so they feel like, oh, well, if organ procurement's here, the OPO's here, we failed in our task. We failed in our, so it's almost like they ward us off like, oh no, they're here, and I'm not going to say the V word. We'll get to that. You get to the point where they just are like, why are you here? And so we become part of that omen. Is that in your experience too?
Yes. And that goes back to the original statement of caring for the caregivers, right? Because that's traumatic. That's traumatic. I mean, every person who has worked for an organ procurement organization in this country understands what it is to walk into the unit and have a nurse or a doctor turn in their tracks and go a different direction because they see you coming. Right? Now you could experience that however you need to experience that. The way that I experience a nurse or a doctor doing that is, man, that hurt. Seeing me walk into the unit, that hurts. And now on their end, you know, pick a reason, any reason. It's a nuisance. Here we go. Why are they here? Pick a reason, any reason. They're having to reason why it is that they can't stand seeing us in the unit. Right? We are the bad juju. We are that bad omen. We bring something that the staff do not want. All of that that's a reality of how we're perceived, right? And I take that back and I say my first job in the unit is caring for the human beings who've been providing care for these families. I think and I'm discovering this right now as we're talking, that I think that part of me has been a big part of my success in the hospitals that I serve. I can't tell you how many times I've walked into a unit and I see a smiling face, or I'm greeted in a way that some hospitals would greet me when they don't know me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it comes with time.
Yeah, yeah. I just I was in Kentucky a few days ago, and the last nurse I spoke with, she said, "Safe travels. I hope to not see you again." And
It's a shared sentiment, I think, across a lot of hospitals.
yeah, but I looked at her and she looked at me and we smiled, and there was an understanding of what she meant, right? But the safe travels, the well wishes as I was leaving, that was heartfelt. That's a nurse who I've worked with before. She appreciated the way that I cared for this family. Um, and believe it or not, her taking the time to even say that was a thank you. And that's how I heard it. So caring for the caregiver first,
Important.
allows me the pathway to care for the families in a way that the care team can really honor and respect. And yes, the perspective of they're losing their patient, that doesn't change, right? The loss is felt just the same. And the hospital staff that I work with appreciate that I'm the person that's going to be with this family. And if it needs to happen, I'm glad it's you. Uh,
I think part of it is, I think the hospital, at least the physicians, the nurses, I mean, the staff, they realize we do come with a message of hope. The problem, or not really the problem, but the difference is it wasn't the hope they were hoping for. The hope they were hoping for was that this person was going to get out of the bed and go on with their life and they were going to continue. And so I think that's their hope. That's their hope. And we're bringing a different kind of hope. The hope is not for the person who's in the bed because that person now typically the treatment is futile or they didn't want to continue living this way and so they're moving on, they're transitioning to what the next phase of life is going to be because they would have never wanted to remain on a ventilator or whatever the case may be. And that we're not necessarily offering the hope in the definition that they were hoping for. It's a different definition. And so I see exactly what you're talking about when you get those well wishes or the thank yous at the end. The thank you is not as fully heartfelt, but they are completely recognized. It's a different kind of a thank you.
yeah, we change the trajectory, right? Organ procurement organizations, we change the trajectory. And now I'm omitting or leaving out what direction that new trajectory is going to take you, right? And I think that's what's scary for the staff. We don't know, they don't know what direction this is now going to change to, right? We don't know if this is going to take a few days of donor management into the donation process. We don't know if this family is going to become angry because you walked in and had this conversation. We don't know if now the family is going to be mad at us for letting you in. One thing is for certain. Our presence changes the trajectory. My experience with the families that I've served is that more often than not, the trajectory has changed into the perspective of miracle work, right?
Yeah.
I can go on, story after story of families. Well, the last family I was with in Kentucky said to me, "This is the only thing that has made this feel okay." And that statement there, that's that's a statement that obligates me to continue on this pathway. Because when you get to hear a daughter who's losing a parent say that out loud, that obligates me to walk into any room fearlessly because the potential for that statement to be made is
Yeah.
very high.
You're looking for that outcome now. Now that this is the outcome that you're hoping to be able to elicit from your families because you know that it contains a lot of it's powerful. It's really powerful.
Well, I want to say something about what you just said. What I am hoping for when I walk into that room is what I pray for before I walk into that room. Please give me whatever it is that this family needs for this moment. Please give me the words. Please give me the feeling. Please give me what it is that I need to bring into this room that it is that they need, right? I care if donation occurs. Donation occurring is part of how I can continue doing what I do. It's part of what provides for me. It's part of what allows me a livelihood. Deep down inside, my only hope is that I have a positive effect on what is happening in that room,
Yeah.
whether or not
Yeah.
donation.
Outside the idea of whether donation happens or not, you hope that the
Yeah.
decisions made are in the best interest of the family and what they need to heal, not necessarily that you're trying to elicit a yes. It's that you hope that whatever decisions are made, and I completely understand the sentiment because this is felt by a lot of people. The hope here is not that we gain the yes. The hope here is that they come to a realization and they come to a common understanding amongst the entire family of what is going to best represent the patient and the family at the end of the day. And if that means no for them because of the well wishes, because of their religion, because of the background, because of maybe the way that the person passed away, who knows? But as long as they come to a decision that really all encompasses the entire family and they feel like that's the best decision for them in the moment, that's all we can really ask for. The end.
Well, I will tell you, you said that we're hopeful. A lot of people can. understand this sentiment that I just expressed, right? Donation not being the end result. It's not the reason that I walk into that room. It's also important to talk about that I have the luxury of feeling that way in front of a family, right? And I'm going to categorize that as a luxury. I have the luxury of being able to feel that way. I would say to you that if any CEO in this country, any CEO for an organ procurement organization was listening to me, they might say to you, I don't share that sentiment. The end result of a conversation about donation should be a yes, and we need to get as many yeses as we possibly can. And if you are not the person to get the yes in every room that you walk into, we need to wonder whether you are the appropriate representative for the people who are waiting on that organ transplant list. But because who we need is someone who is going to inspire this family to say yes every single time that you walk into that room, right? Now, I'm at odds with that. I'm
Yeah.
at odds with that because that's not why I do the work. That being said, I am what you would say, what OPOs would call uh, a high authorizing designated requester. The majority of,
What does that mean? And I
yeah,
remember
so
what
that
else
means,
you can say, so we'll go back to that. But
all
yes,
right.
go explain what that means.
So that means that organ procurement organizations look at the body of my work and they say, this man has gotten more yeses to donation from families he's been in front of than he has people say no to him. So if you want a very good chance at saving a life at someone on that transplant waiting list, I'm the person you want walking into that room. And most organ procurement organizations that I've worked with recognize that. And they keep me coming back because I get yeses from families when it comes to donation. But it's not the reason I do this work. And that's why it puts me at odds with the CEOs who might be listening.
That's completely valid. So I think that, if I had to give you 2 categories to check from and I say, Ivan, when you walk into the room, is your in the hierarchy of things that you are going into in the mind frame that if you can only check one, is it the ability to gain the yes, or is it the ability to meet the family where they're at?
It's the ability to meet the family where they're at.
I already knew the answer to that, but yeah, I
Yeah.
figured as much. I mean, I think that's where it's, but you did say something earlier, and what you said was changing the trajectory, coming
Yeah.
into a hospital and changing the trajectory. I want to be clear, and I think that this goes for, I think, any OPO that's out there. When we are walking into a hospital and we're changing the trajectory, I think what you mean by that is we're changing how the family is going to frame what they're looking at. The forks in the road are going to become, we don't know what they are. I mean, these are divisive topics. So you're walking in and you don't know if are they going to be happy. I've had families say, "Thank you for letting me know this person was registered. That takes a lot of big weight off of my chest to know what their wishes were." I've had families tell me, "Go away," and not so nicely. I mean, I've had the content of the gamut. What this doesn't mean, at least in my eyes, we I've never walked into a hospital with the intent of changing the family's mind on their trajectory for their care. I've never walked into a hospital and followed up a family or a physician's meeting where the physician said, "Look, we could trach and peg and do long-term care, or we could withdraw life support. By the way, there's a third option. Here's donation." And then now you throw this third option to change your trajectory, and they go, "You know what? Let's do it with organ donation." I think that is very difficult to tell a family, "Hey, listen, maybe the care is not quite futile," but I think introducing the option or the opportunity for donation early on, in some instances, could be appropriate given what's going on with that patient. But I never want it to be an option on the table when they're trying to figure out what's best for their loved one. I think after they've decided either care is futile, we are looking at withdrawal life support, whatever the case may be, after they've come to the decision that the care is futile, then the option for donation then becomes up. So we're not changing that trajectory. Would you agree or disagree? Or where are you at on that?
Well, let me give you a two-part answer to this. First, the first part of the answer is there's nothing more insulting to me as a human being when someone says, I don't think you're going to be able to convince this family to say yes, right?
Yeah. Challenge accepted.
I hear that and I say, well, I was never planning to convince a family to do anything. That's first and foremost because that's not what I do. I don't convince.
Yeah. That's a bad sleazy car salesman tactic kinda
Yeah,
thing, and I apologize for any car salesmen that are listening. That's not my intent, but
yeah.
you get what I'm saying.
I absolutely don't convince. The majority of times, the conversation consists of a series of questions and answers, and the answers that the family has, that's coming from them, right? So I'll give you one very quick question. Is the idea of your loved one saving a life, does the idea of him giving the gift of life to someone else, if there is nothing else that could be done for him, does that align with his core values and how he lived? Often,
That's a great
even when
first of all, that's
e-
really good.
e- even when the family is in grief, even when a family says, I cannot believe that I'm having this kind of conversation. I cannot believe that this is what I'm talking about. Yesterday, he was just fine. I cannot believe that this is what's being discussed in this room. If you want me to say no, I'm telling you no because I don't want this to happen. But if you're asking me if he would have done this in his lifetime, if he was here in front of you and you asked him that, well, the answer to that is yes. This is who he was. My loved one, he would give you the shirt off his back, right? Now, I hear that more often than not. And that came out of a question about, does this align with their core values? Now, despite grief, families will say it does. It does. If you knew him, he would give you the last dollar in his pocket. That's just who he was. And that right there, I think, is what's difficult to hear. Staff members aren't present. Hospital staff members are not present. They see the family's grief. They see the devastation of the person who's there for their loved one. But it's seldom that they're in the room to hear that sort of statement.
Yep.
So when we walk out of the room, the nurse or the doctor is, I don't know how you did that. And for them, it's, how did you go from anger, from grief, from despair, from not understanding? How did you go from that to a yes to donation? We don't understand that. But it's I've tried to explain, it's an end result of the questions that I've asked about the person's loved one. There's no convincing. They have the answers already. Now, how you ask the questions make a very big impact on the decision that they're going to make, certainly. And for that matter, there is tradecraft in the way that I craft those questions and the pace that I ask those questions and when I ask them. So that's the first part of the answer, right?
Okay.
No convincing. The second part is the change of the trajectory and when should it occur? So organ procurement organizations inevitably are going to change the trajectory of what is happening in the room. If a family makes a decision to remove the ventilator, I'll call it life support for now, to remove life support, and they have said, we want to focus on keeping him or her comfortable. We want him or her to not feel any pain. Please give them pain medication and remove the ventilator. We're ready to stop seeing them suffer. Then the hospital says, okay, the family has made this decision. We have to now call the organ procurement organization because they need to speak to this family before that happens, right? I have grown to an understanding and a feeling and an acceptance of the idea that I think by the time that decision is made, it's too late. There was a moment in time in my career where I thought, that's right, we shouldn't interact with them until they've made that decision, right? But I've seen far too many families now in the hundreds, if not thousands of conversations that I've had that showing up after that decision is made, it's too late.
Yeah, they've already started on that trajectory heading down the path. They're planning wakes, they're planning funerals, they're calling in, like, they're pretty much closing out and rounding out what they are anticipating to be hours or maybe a
Yes.
day.
Yes. Now, I've only experienced this once, and this is recently within the last 6 months, where a physician says to a family, long term care through a trach and peg, comfort care through comfort medication, pain medication, and the removal of life support. We know that when we remove the ventilator, he or she's going to pass within a certain amount of time. We can't tell you exactly when that's going to happen, but we know that Death is imminent once that ventilator is removed. And I also have a gentleman here from the organ procurement organization. His name is Ivan. He's going to be speaking to you about what it means for a family to say yes to donation. Right now, I was in the middle of this discussion when I discovered that they had not made the decision. I was too late. I was in the room. The doctor presented it this way.
You're a part of the options now.
As part of the options now. And when the physician put it that way, the husband said, "Okay, I'm waiting for my wife's mom to show up so that I can have a better understanding of what decision is the right decision for her." The husband said, "I understand that she's not going to survive. If I don't choose the trach and peg, I understand that, but my mother-in-law has no idea what's happening, and I need to speak with her. Can we meet at a later time?" Obviously, yes. Take all the time in the world. Now, what I discovered for that family is, for the first time ever in my OPO career, I was able to discover that this gentleman was very much at ease with understanding that these were the options that were provided for him, and there was no the feeling that the organ procurement organization representative was in the room was not taboo in that moment for him, right?
Yeah.
But I would say that I would be absolutely careful with that, because that's downright dangerous. However, the way that this physician set this conversation up, and the way that I was introduced, and the way that it happened, it just felt perfect for this family, right? Now, perfect for this family, I can almost assure you it's not going to be perfect for the other 99% of the families that are out there. But if I had an ideal way of doing it, I would say I would try to recreate that conversation with every family who's being given the options about end of life, long term care, comfort care, or the trajectory of organ donation as end of life is imminent,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. No, I think that that's a good way of phrasing it and putting it. Like, I think that that scenario, I think, is a perfect scenario in which I think that giving those options and the person having the understanding that the care was futile, like it's still the understanding is there. This is a presented option because they know the other two options are very valid. If you walk into a room or a situation where the person is not understanding of futile care, or that this patient is not going to expire, and they are very, very much on the fence of like, no, I want to keep going. And the physician, the staff, the hospital is telling them this is not viable, this is not survivable, whatever the case may be. It's not a survivable scenario. And you put an OPO in there from the public's perspective, the reason they want to give up on care, the reason that the care is quote unquote futile is because of us. So
Hmm.
then they're you get this public perception, and I've been doing this just more than 10 years now, and I've talked to not as many families as you for sure. However, in this, you get this public perception that we aren't advocating for their care, and I would say that's wrong. There's been more times that I've shown up and looked in a patient's chart and wondered, what's going on here? Why haven't they done X? Why haven't they done Y? Why haven't they done Z? Looking at their care, and I've approached the hospital staff on more times to say, I don't know that we should be involved yet. We shouldn't be interjecting yet. I've done that far more times than I don't think I've ever said, like, how about donation? How about we take over now? The perception from the public is that we're sweeping in to hope to recover these organs, and we're hoping to take these organs and use the H word and harvest them. Like that's not what we do. Like, we show up on site, we have these conversations. We're very tactful, I think, in any regard to make sure that our timing is correct, it's appropriate, taking both, like you said, staff and families' feelings into account to figure out if we're even supposed to be in the room yet.
Yeah, well, with that in mind, I have a very quick story about my last service here. I was called into a hospital where the physician said, "Okay, you guys need to come speak to this family because they want to remove the ventilator. They're going to be doing this at some point this afternoon. They're just waiting for more family to arrive. So now is the time you got to go speak to them." Okay, no problem. I show up. I do the legwork. Everything seems to be right. I checked in with the nurse. The nurse says the same thing. I checked in with the treating physicians, the resident, the intensivist, the attending happened to be in a huddle. Perfect timing. I got to meet with all three of them. They were all in agreement that that is, in fact, what the family has decided to do. I was walking into the conversation with the family. I had secured a private conference room. I invited one of the OPO staff members to come witness a donation discussion. She has said, I've never done this. This is terrifying. I said, well, now is a good time for you to be present. I'm about to have a full donation discussion with a family who has clearly made the decision to remove the ventilator. I walk into the room. I have a transparent introduction. My name is Ivan Sampson. I'm a in this state they call it family support specialist. I'm with, and then I say the name of the organ procurement organization. I've been informed that you've made the difficult decision to remove the ventilator, and that's why I'm in the room. And the person I was speaking to said no. The
Oh,
the person I was speaking to looked at her husband, and her husband was shaking his head no. And I said, okay,
well,
would you mind
that's
telling
a
me?
nightmare scenario.
Yeah, and I asked the family, would you mind informing me a little bit about where you are and what your decision making has been? And she said, I just don't want my mom to have any more EVDs, ventricular drains. I just don't want her to go through any more surgeries. She said, I'm okay with the changing of the code status. We just went from the full code, full treat. I was just talking to my mom 2 days ago. She said, if I have to change the code status, I will. I just don't want her to have any more surgeries. So I say to them, both in the room, I said, okay, the conversations that I have are generally about the end of life. And it's clear that that's not where you are at the moment. So if you would allow me, I'm going to reprioritize the discussion. I'm going to walk out of the room. I'm going to have the conversation with the doctors, and I'm going to request that they speak to you a little bit more about what your understanding is, about what your decisions are. It appeared to me that you were on the way down to the cafeteria, get some food, some to eat or drink. So why don't you do that? Give yourself a moment to take care of yourself. While you're doing that, I'll speak to the care team. When you come back, I'll have them have another conversation. That's exactly what happened. That was the end of the discussion. The person that was shadowing me said, "Well, I didn't see that coming." And I
No,
said, "Well, yeah,
that's
well, yeah,
hard.
neither did I, but we were able to stop it in its track. And that's methodology, right? Like I don't go into the room just to speak about donation. I need to confirm, even though the doctor, the nurse, the social worker, everyone's telling me that this family is ready, more often than not, what the family is communicating and what the care team is hearing, there's a very big disconnect
Yeah,
in between that, right? Even just the idea of, yes, I want him to be comfortable. Well, comfort, care, and comfortable can mean
that's
very different things, right?
vastly different.
Vastly different. I find myself, as you said, more often than not advocating for families for their needs. Now, in full transparency, I know that the end result is the same. Death is imminent. That's the only reason that I'm in the building. Death is imminent. That does not mean that we have carte blanche to just go in and do whatever it is that we want to do. They deserve to have the care from the care team, the understanding that they need to have before they make the next end of life decision, right? So, as an organization, OPOs across the country, when you're doing it well and you're doing it the right way, you are a strong advocate for families because what they're sharing with that care team is not always what is exactly happening.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And I think, one of the statements I heard a long time ago that I heard somebody in your position teach me, and I at the moment, in the moment, I thought that's a strange question to ask. But then in full transparency afterwards, completely understood. And I think it's exactly what you just said. Walking into a room and saying, open, transparent introduction, saying who you are, but then asking them what they understand about the patient's care. Where are they at? And figuring out, because you'll get some nightmare scenarios where somebody tells you, like you just said, we just want the EVD removed and we're hoping that we can walk her out of here still. You were just about to say, how about donation, at some point. So, and them telling you like their expectation, and even as small as, and I know you know this too, but even as small as how they're speaking of that person. Are they talking about them in the past tense or the present tense?
Mhm.
She was nice or she is nice. When you have somebody talking about them in the present tense, like, I can't wait until we can go and get Chick-fil-A together, or I can't wait until we can go get In and Out together. Like, it's going to be so cool. As opposed to, I remember when we used to go and get Chick-fil-A together. Well, those were amazing times. Just hearing that alone, you're like, there's still an expectation that this person's going to walk out of here. And if you come to the table with, how about donation? you're probably not going to be met with a lot of excitement from anybody. So, man, well, I think the reason, drum roll please, and the
Yeah.
big thing here is you've taken all this time, all this experience, and you felt the passion and the need to put this into one concise, clear book. And first of all, congratulations. I know that this is about to drop finally, and this is a long time waiting. So why don't we go over what you were hoping to achieve with this book and what we can expect from this book?
Yeah. So I have written a book. The title of it is Critical Care, Love, and Decision Making, a guidebook.
Okay.
And it is, in fact, a guidebook. I think I've taken my experience with families in the hospital setting is that the overall experience is that as a society, we are vastly and grossly unprepared for what it means for one of our loved ones to go through a critical care emergency. We don't talk about it, which leads to we don't prepare for it, which leads to I don't know what we do, to I don't know what's happening, to oh my God, this is it. And I think my heart broke and breaks far too many times to not want to do something about it. This book is a tribute to the families I've been in service to, uh, and it attempts to give our society, our families out there, something that they can read, something that they can have, something that they can use to prepare for if, in the worst case scenario, their loved one ends up in a critical care emergency. This will inform them. Now, it's written for the individual. It's written for the person to read and say,
So it's first person. It's for the
yeah,
okay, gotcha. And is this like a
yeah,
literature book that they can read and get information? Is it a workbook where they can kind of fill in blanks? Tell us a little bit about what that looks like.
yeah. So it's 179 pages as of my
Okay.
final submission, and it goes everything from what is a hospital environment, how do you navigate a hospital environment, what is an intensive care unit, what's a critical care unit. It breaks down, well, what is code status, what type of medicine is practiced in the emergency room when you come in, who is going to care for you. Uh, it is an A to Z guidebook. And what I'm really hoping for is for the reader to say to themselves, oh, I never thought about that. I don't know that I want to be on a ventilator that long. Or, uh, sure, I'll do one surgery, but I don't want to keep going back for surgeries
Multiples in a row.
multiples in a row.
If they're telling you it's futile.
Yeah, they're telling you it's futile. I think what I'm very hopeful for is that this actually it is a donation discussion to the extent that it's asking you questions. What do you want for yourself? What do you want for yourself? Even to the extent of, hey, who do you want visiting you in the ICU room?
That's a big one. You don't
Right?
think it's big until it's actually a thing, but
You,
it's
you
big.
don't think it's big. Hey, do you want people taking pictures of you and putting it on social media? Now, you don't think of that
You don't.
until a cousin is putting you on Facebook with the ventilator connected and you look terrible,
Yeah, no,
right?
they've seen families come in with T-shirts that they had made the day before, and it's a picture of them and their current status, and I'm like, I don't think they would appreciate that picture. Do you didn't find
Yeah.
anything else?
Yeah, so everything that I have learned in the critical care setting and all the things that I have wanted families to know and to have is condensed into this book. And I purposefully have made it non-clinical, so you do not have to be a clinician or a medical professional to understand the language that's in this book.
So no degree needed to actually get through the book is what you're saying.
No, no, no,
Okay, so I
no.
can read this thing. Okay.
Yeah, you can read this thing, you could go through it, and that's with purpose. That's with purpose because my experience with families, sometimes physicians, nurses, you might as well be speaking an alien language when we're talking about clinical matters in the intensive care unit. To say that it is in no way dumbed down, it is in no way it is written in a way that can be understood by readers from all backgrounds.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you took that approach because, one of the things that is very true is I hope that people seek this book out proactively. That's my hope for you, that people look at this book and they, maybe somebody brought up a difficult situation or topic that came up and maybe in a conversation around dinner. These conversations happen far too infrequently. And so they're because they're uncomfortable. Nobody wants to talk about it. We're all going to be there one day. All of us, none of us are going to live forever. But the conversation about all of these different things, they're not very frequent. My hope for you is that in some way, shape, or form, somebody brings up a conversation about a difficult dynamic that they had, and maybe they found your book and they're able to express, like, I found this book that was helping me. And then maybe through a proactive nature, somebody will go out there and they'll get this book and they'll be able to use it. But for those people that are looking for a resource and they are in the situation where they need this resource, at that point, they're not reading to their full capacity. They're not taking in information at their full capacity. They're not even being able to really make decisions or rational decisions at the capacity they would if they were in a normal day making normal decisions 3 weeks prior. And I've always been told you want to have conversations with people or you want to be able to speak with people at about a fifth or sixth grade level so that they are taking in information because it is very loud in their head at that point. There's lots of decisions, there's lots of things going on, there's a lot of unknowns at that in that moment. So it makes me happy that you took that into account when you wrote this book, that it wasn't this high level book that you almost have to have a degree to understand or uses a bunch of terminology. It's written for the average person to be able to read, understand, and use it as a guide even in that moment.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm hoping for that also. My wife has asked me, okay, so where do you put this book? Where in the hospital do you put this book? And I say, well, I certainly don't want it in the waiting room. Uh,
No,
but by the time a family is in a waiting room, it is far too late. That book, it may be useful to a family member on the peripheral who is not going through the grief that the core group of the family is going through. But grief changes everything. And you don't want to wait to read this book until you're in a moment of grief because it may inform you to a certain degree. Grief does what it does. It changes our ability to think. It changes our ability to feel. Our perception. Everything has changed. So I'm hopeful for hospitals maybe to pick this up and to provide to their families. I'm hopeful for organ procurement organizations to give this to the families at some of their table events, wherever that may be. The book does go into organ and tissue donation. I attempt to provide the information in an unbiased way so that families and individuals can make decisions for themselves and what's appropriate for them. I feel the way that I feel about donation clearly, and that's why I do what I do and I continue in my service to families. I think that donation is a miraculous gift and it can be healing for the families of the donors and miraculous for the families of recipients. And it keeps me on this pathway. And donation is a very personal decision. And it's going to be different for everyone. And it should be that way. It should be. It aligns to their core values. I think you'll find in this book everything that you need to help you make that decision. I had a vice president of operations for an organ procurement organization who found out that I was writing this book. And he said to me, Ivan, please include that donation takes time in this book. And that was a big ask. And that's one of the things that I define in there. In this book, there's a definition of what does it mean to be a donor and what does it mean in terms of time frame? How will that impact a family? What do you do with this time? Why does it take time? So I'm hopeful for people to pick that up and be able to inform themselves of it. And it does also, it deals with the mythology of donation, right? Because I heard too many times, even from my friends, well, I don't want to be a donor because if I'm a donor, they're not going to take care of you.
no,
So
we've heard a lot of these.
yeah. So I deal with the mythology of donation and what it means for hospitals. And I delve a little bit into this idea, that dichotomy, right? That the hospitals don't actually like seeing us in the hospital. If it was up to them, they don't call the organ procurement organization. They don't want your organs, and they certainly don't want us in the hospital. So I delve into that as well, so that we can have a better, more informed society, so that when they make decisions, it is from a place and a position of being informed. Informed consent is what this book is all about, giving you all of the information you need to make the decisions that you would want if something like this should ever.
I think this book is going to be great. I mean, I think you're right. I think that maybe this book is perfect for when you have a family who's coming in and the person that is coming in is under in hospitals now. This is not uncommon. There are definitely instances in which somebody comes into a hospital in which, ultimately they end up not making it and it's not expected. But there are a lot of cases where from the very admission, they understand that this is a very futile possibility that the person leaves with any quality of life. That's even if they survive. And I think that's where the space is for this book. They get their admission paperwork. They have a book that kind of says this is what to expect. It's kind of and you have to excuse the term, but it's almost like a, ICU or hospitals for dummies. It's almost like, hey, this is because we don't talk about it. This is not something that is known. This is not something that's widely known, and a there's really not a resource that like you've created that goes through that much A to Z with that ability to describe it in a way that the public can understand it and not have a degree because they're going to be exposed to so many decisions and so many things that have probably never been discussed at dinner or around. And now they're put in a position where they have a lot of decisions that are coming at them and they just don't know where to go with any of this.
Yeah, isn't it scary that the most informed place that we come from is an episode of Grey's Anatomy,
No, seriously,
right?
seriously, you're
Yeah.
not wrong. You're not wrong. And they get it wrong half the time. I mean, for those that are listening that are, in maybe media, I mean, I think there's been one episode where I actually felt compelled to write back to the writers and say, you guys got it right. And, and it was one episode where I was like, that was pretty spot on. But those are very few and far between. I mean, the majority of public and media don't know or understand what it is to be in the organ donation realm and what it takes to actually do organ donation. It's pretty, it's highly publicized, but typically it's wrong. So with that, I do want to give you the opportunity to kind of change this a little bit up. If you have somebody who's listening right now and maybe they're in a sticky situation, they found this podcast episode because we're talking about end of life decisions and things like that. If they're listening to this episode right now and they're wondering if this book is for them and you had the opportunity to speak directly to them and tell them why this book could be good, what would you tell them?
I would say that planning for the end of our life is a testament of love that we have for the people who love us. I would say that if you have a group of individuals who are going to continue living on this planet beyond you and you care for them, it is a good idea to read this book, answer these questions for yourself, and then provide them with the answers that you need them to have because they're going to be without you and they're not going to be able to make decisions. But if you give them the answers, they could focus on their grief. And when the doctor walks in and asks them, do we want full treatment? Do we want to continue with chemicals to keep that blood pressure up? What do we do with the heart? What do we do if the heart stops? A family who is informed can answer those questions directly. And they can look at the doctor and say, we've had this conversation. He doesn't want to be on the ventilator more than 3 days. We've had that talk. We've also talked about the compressions. He doesn't want people jumping on his chest. A family that's able to answer that question, those questions, is far better off than the family who has to look at one another, shrugs their shoulders, and says, we don't know. Can you give us some time to think about this? The suffering happens at that moment. We don't know. Can you give us time to think about this? That's where the suffering grabs hold. But a family who has those answers, they could focus on the grief from a different perspective, from a different place. Yeah. They have the answers. They're prepared.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think it's pretty rare that the family all comes to a general consensus. Being uninformed, if they're posed with a question that is that sensitive, it's pretty rare that everybody looks around the room and has a pretty general consensus in the moment. Typically, everyone has a different idea what it's going to look like based on whatever their personal feelings are or maybe their conversations. So, with that being said, Ivan, I want to say thank you. I really do appreciate that, you come with all this wealth of knowledge and experience and love and had the fortitude and the ability to put together a resource for people. Is there any parting thoughts?
Yes, Bobby, I am hopeful also as much as I have this book coming out, and this is exciting for me. I am excited for our society. I'm excited for OPOs. I'm excited for hospitals, for doctors, nurses, any member of the healthcare profession, and families who are going to tune into your podcast. I'm excited because they're going to hear the voices of individuals that do this work who never have an opportunity to be heard. I'm excited because your plan, as I understand it, is to have families come on here and talk about their experiences. I don't know how the universe put us together, but I am excited that it did, and I'm excited to see this podcast grow. I'm excited to see your guests, to hear their voices, and is selfishly, I think the podcast is extremely useful. It's extremely useful for my book, for donation, but mostly to prepare families, So I'm excited for you.
Yeah, it's much needed. The society
Thank
needs
you.
it. I think as a whole, society needs to hear this. And for those that are listening, this is not the last time you're going to hear Ivan on here, because I think that his voice is strong when it comes to in talking with families. And so as we move through this journey together and have these conversations with families and kind of feel what they're feeling, my hope obviously is for it to be powerful, for it to kind of connect us as people and understand what this really means. But I think a big part of this is kind of understanding and listening to these voices that typically are not heard. I mean, we see on social media, we see in broadcasts what it means when they meet the recipients, and we see the love and the joy that comes there, but very seldom do we have the opportunity to hear about the pain that preceded it. And so I think in listening to what it meant for them and what that journey felt like for them will make the end result and the meeting of the recipients that much sweeter. Thank you so much, Ivan. I really do appreciate you coming out. I really do appreciate all these words. Thank you so much for when can we expect this book?
Thank you. So I've been told the last iteration I should have in print by the 13th of this month. So I'm 10 days away. I'm counting. I'm counting.
And where will it be available? Do you know?
It's going to be available on Amazon Books, Apple Book on the Apple Bookstore, Kindle. It's going to be on my website, samsonbooksllc.com. You'll have plenty of places to buy them from, to download them. You'll be able to have it in print form, PDF form, read it on your Kindle, read it on your iPad. It will be available.
We'll
And
put
for
the
those,
links in the show notes too, so there will be a link there once we get that link from you. And then, is there a possibility of maybe an audiobook? Would you consider maybe doing the voice portion of it, maybe?
yeah, maybe we'll see. We'll see. I'm excited for lots of new doors that are going to be open. We'll
Yeah.
see.
And last but not least, I know the book hasn't dropped yet. Maybe is there a plan for book number 2? Do we have ideas for maybe a second?
There is title. The second book is called Death Settles In. Death Settles In is going to be the stories of communication in the intensive care unit, right? You got a brief insight into that. The story of the daughter who says, "No, we are not there.
Yeah.
We are not there." It takes us days to accept what's actually happening, and that book is about the days leading up to that acceptance.
Wow, well, cool. That's powerful. Yeah, we'll look forward to that for sure. I can't imagine. I mean, that sounds like it's going to be really good. So, well, as always, for those that are out there listening and you've been impacted by organ and tissue donation and you have maybe a story to tell, down in the show notes, you'll find a link to connect directly to me. I'd love to hear your story, bring you on the podcast. But for now, thanks everybody.